You can't stand here.
the security chief said sharply. This gate isn't for people like you. The single dad froze when the metal barrier stayed locked and the guards stared past him. By the way, where are you watching from? Tell me in the comments below. He didn't raise his voice or argue, even when they threatened to escort him away. None of them knew the system was already listening. They stopped the single dad at the mansion gate like he was trespassing. Security waved him back, judged his boots, and treated his daughter like a mistake to escort away. But the single dad didn't argue. He calmly asked to check one thing on the keypad. What happened next made the guards freeze, and the whole driveway went quiet. Because this wasn't really about a gate, it was about who gets believed. Before I show you the exact moment when one sentence from his daughter triggered a system-wide lock and exposed the truth, he lowered his hand from the keypad and stepped back, as if he'd touched nothing at all. Calm, still, unshaken. The kind of stillness that didn't come from weakness, but from someone used to rooms where mistakes cost lives. His shoulders stayed relaxed, boots planted on the gravel drive, eyes scanning without being obvious. This place wasn't just stone and iron to him. It was the finish line of years spent rebuilding after loss. A promise he'd made quietly to a child who trusted him without question. Every locked bar and polished camera was supposed to mean safety for her. Being denied entry wasn't just embarrassing. It felt like someone trying to erase the proof that the promise mattered. The woman in charge of security, Alara Ketterly, adjusted her earpiece and watched him with narrowed eyes. She saw a man out of place, a laborer lingering too close to privilege. Around them, engines idled, soft music drifted from inside the estate, and arriving guests slowed, curiosity flickering as they took in the scene. He felt his daughter's fingers curl tighter around his own. Not scared, confused, that hurt more. He squeezed back once, grounding them both. The iron gate hummed faintly, a sound most people ignored, but his attention caught on it immediately. The pitch was wrong, too tight, like a system holding its breath. Alara's voice cut through the air again, crisp and practiced, reminding everyone who held authority here. She ordered checks, repeated protocols, made it clear this wasn't a misunderstanding but a decision. Each word landed heavier than the last, stacking judgment on top of judgment. He didn't respond. Instead, his gaze drifted to the control housing near the gate, to the subtle wear along its edge. Years ago, he'd learned how systems aged, how stress left fingerprints if you knew where to look. This one was under strain already, not broken, waiting. A few onlookers shifted uncomfortably. Someone whispered that the man seemed too calm. Another muttered that the child shouldn't be standing there. Alara mistook the murmurs for support and straightened, doubling down. The rules were the rules. Appearances mattered. Order had to be maintained. He finally spoke softly, asking a question no one expected. Not permission, not a plea, a clarification about the gate's status. The guard nearest the panel scoffed, but Alara hesitated. Just a fraction too long. That hesitation was enough. The hum deepened. A light on the panel blinked once, then steadied. He stepped back again, hands visible, non-threatening, as if to say he'd done nothing at all. His daughter looked up at him, searching his face, and he gave her a small nod. Inside the estate, something shifted. Not yet obvious. Just a subtle rebalancing, like weight moving across a bridge. Alara felt it before she understood it, irritation tightening her jaw as she demanded reports. He waited. Patience had always been part of the job. Back when he'd learned that the loudest person in the room was rarely the one in control. The driveway seemed to narrow, attention funneling toward the quiet man and the child beside him. This was only the beginning. The gate remained closed, but the system was awake now. And soon, everyone watching would learn exactly who had built the rules they were so eager to enforce. The gate stayed closed, but the silence around it thickened, as if the estate itself were listening now. Ilara lifted her wrist and spoke sharply into her mic, demanding a status check. Her confidence just slightly overplayed. No alarms sounded, no lights flashed, yet something unseen had shifted, and that uncertainty irritated her more than open defiance ever could. She stepped closer, heels crunching on gravel, eyes sweeping over the man again, his jacket worn at the cuffs, his posture too composed for someone supposedly caught trespassing. "Sir," she said, slower this time, "you're interfering with a restricted access point. I'm going to need you to step away from the gate with your child." He didn't move. He simply looked at her, expression unreadable, as though measuring not her authority, but her understanding. The driveway felt smaller, watched. Guests arriving for the evening event lingered instead of passing through, curiosity outweighing etiquette. A couple of phones came out, half-hidden, recording without commitment. Behind Ilara, one of the guards muttered that the panel wasn't responding the way it should. She shot him a warning look, then turned back, voice firming. She cited protocols, liability, safety concerns. Each word was a brick in a wall she believed would hold. She didn't notice how the man's eyes flicked briefly toward the housing unit again, then away, like someone checking a pulse. His daughter shifted beside him, sneakers scuffing the stones. He crouched slightly so she could hear him, murmuring reassurance, a promise that they'd go inside soon. That promise wasn't bravado, it was certainty. She nodded, trusting him in the simple, absolute way only children could. Ilara exhaled through her nose and signaled to 2 guards to flank the gate. "Escort them back to the service lane," she ordered. "We'll verify identity once they're clear of the entrance." That was when the panel chimed softly. Not an alarm, just a single, polite tone. The guards froze. Ilara's head snapped toward the sound, irritation flashing into suspicion. She demanded a readout. The response came delayed, fragmented, as if the system were sorting through something it hadn't expected to find. A few feet away, a maintenance worker assigned to the event frowned at his tablet. He glanced from the screen to the man at the gate, then back again. "That's odd," he murmured, not meaning to be heard. The woman in charge stiffened. "What's odd?" she demanded. "Access logic just looped," he said carefully, "like it's cross-checking an internal reference." Ilara's jaw tightened. She turned back toward the man, suspicion sharpening. "What did you touch?" "Nothing I wasn't supposed to," he replied evenly. The answer unsettled her more than denial would have. Around them, murmurs grew louder. Someone whispered that security looked rattled. Another remarked on how calm the man was. The class divide, once clean and invisible, started to fray at the edges. If you're still with me, subscribe with the bell on, because this moment is where everything quietly starts turning. Ilara made a decision. She ordered a full credentials sweep, intent on burying whatever anomaly had appeared under layers of procedure. And the irony didn't occur to her, that procedures were exactly where the problem lived. Guards moved, radios crackled, and the gate remained stubbornly closed, neither denying nor granting entry. The man straightened to his full height, eyes following the activity without interference. Years ago, he'd learned that systems under stress revealed themselves not through noise, but through hesitation. This one hesitated again, lights dimming almost imperceptibly before stabilizing. He felt it like pressure behind the eyes, a familiar warning. His daughter tugged his sleeve and pointed toward the gate, whispering a question only he could hear. He nodded once, lips pressing into a thin line. Not yet. Alara's voice rose as she received incomplete reports. Her authority, so solid minutes ago, now required repetition to maintain. Guests shifted, impatience mixing with intrigue. The estate, meant to showcase control and luxury, had become a stage for uncertainty. He waited, patience stretching the moment thin. Every second brought more witnesses, more eyes on the imbalance playing out in plain view. The woman in charge didn't realize it yet, but by keeping him there, by insisting on her version of order, she was doing exactly what the system demanded. The gate hummed again, deeper this time, as if acknowledging something it recognized. And for the first time since she'd arrived, Ilara looked unsure. Ilara's uncertainty hardened into irritation, and irritation quickly became resolve. She straightened her shoulders, lifted her chin, and chose authority the way some people chose armor. "Lock this down," she said into her mic. "No entries, no exits, until I get a clean verification." The words rippled outward. Guards shifted positions, forming a loose perimeter that subtly pushed the onlookers back while still keeping the man and his daughter squarely in view. The driveway no longer felt like a passage. It felt like a checkpoint. Engines idled, their low vibrations threading into the air, while the distant music from inside the estate continued, oblivious. He felt the change immediately. Not fear, exactly, but pressure. The kind that came when a system was forced into a posture it wasn't designed to hold for long. He exhaled slowly, grounding himself, and glanced down at the girl beside him. She looked up, brows knit, absorbing the tension without fully understanding it. "It's okay," he said quietly, more to himself than anyone else. "We're fine." Ilara heard him anyway. She took it as defiance. "Sir," she snapped, "you're escalating this situation. You've already delayed multiple guests, and now you're interfering with security operations." He met her gaze at last. There was no challenge in his eyes, no bravado, just focus. "You already escalated it," he replied. "I'm just standing here." A murmur rolled through the small crowd. Someone laughed under their breath. A guest in an expensive coat folded their arms. Interest piqued. Ilara noticed and felt a shift, attention drifting away from her control. She didn't like it. "Credentials," she demanded, extending her hand. "Now." He reached into his jacket slowly, deliberately, and pulled out a slim card holder. Not flashy, not impressive. He offered it without comment. Ilara took it, scanned the surface, and frowned. It wasn't what she'd expected. It had no bold titles, no recognizable corporate crest, just a name and a designation that didn't fit neatly into her assumptions. She handed it to a guard with a sharp gesture. "Run it." The seconds stretched. The gate's hum deepened again, then softened, like a breath being taken and released. A light blinked amber instead of green. The guard's tablet lagged, then displayed a status message he didn't immediately understand. "Ma'am," he said cautiously. "It's..." Not rejecting him. Ilara's eyes flashed. "Then why isn't it opening?" The guard swallowed. "It says verification pending." "Pending what?" she snapped. He hesitated. "Internal confirmation." That made no sense to her, and she hated that she didn't understand it. She turned back to the man, suspicion sharpening into accusation. "What kind of trick is this?" He shook his head once. "It's not a trick. It's how you set it up." The words hit harder than he intended. A few people in the crowd went still. Ilara's expression tightened, offense flaring. "I didn't set anything up," she said coldly. "I enforce it." "That's the difference," he replied. For a moment, It looked like she might order his removal outright. Her hand twitched toward her mic, fingers tightening. But then another chime sounded. 2 tones this time, polite but insistent. The panel's light shifted again. Amber pulsing slowly. The maintenance worker from earlier stepped closer, drawn by curiosity he could no longer suppress. He glanced at the display and frowned. "That's odd," he murmured again. Louder this time. "I've never seen it stall like that unless—" He stopped himself, eyes flicking toward Alara. She shot him a warning look that said enough. Well, the man noticed anyway. He filed the reaction away, another confirmation layered quietly on top of the others. This wasn't malfunction. It was design doing exactly what it was meant to do when someone forced the wrong sequence. His daughter tugged his sleeve again, whispering something urgent. He bent slightly, listening, then nodded. "Soon," he murmured. "I promise." Alara caught the exchange and scoffed. "You're making your child stand here while you play games," she said. "That alone is enough reason to remove you." The words cut deeper than she knew. He straightened, jaw tightening just a fraction. "I brought her here because this is our home," he said, "and I'm not leaving her outside it." The silence that followed was heavy, charged. Guests shifted uncomfortably. Phones came up more openly now. Alara felt the weight of their attention pressing in, forcing her to perform certainty she no longer fully felt. She turned sharply to her team. "Initiate secondary verification. Override if you have to." The guard hesitated. "Ma'am, the system's not accepting overrides." That stopped her cold. The hum deepened once more, resonating through the gate, through the ground beneath their feet. Inside the estate, unseen by those outside, something else responded. Doors pausing, sensors recalibrating, protocols waking from dormancy. The man felt it like a familiar rhythm returning. He didn't smile, he didn't move, he just waited. Because once a system reached this point, there was no forcing it. And everyone standing there was about to learn why. The hesitation spread outward from the gate like a held breath finally noticed. Alara stood rigid, her authority suddenly feeling performative instead of absolute. She masked it quickly, lifting her chin as if posture alone could restore control. "Secondary verification is stalling because he's interfering," she said, loud enough for the nearest guests to hear. "Clear him from the access zone." No one moved right away. 2 guards exchanged a glance, uncertainty flickering between them. They weren't defying her, just recalculating. The system's refusal to accept an override had shaken something foundational. Rules were supposed to bend for command. When they didn't, it left people exposed. The man noticed the pause. He didn't capitalize on it. He stayed exactly where he was. Fingers loosely laced, weight evenly distributed. Calm like that wasn't passive, it was practiced. Years of learning when to act and when not to had carved that restraint into muscle memory. Around them, the driveway had fully transformed. What should have been a smooth procession of arrivals now resembled a stalled artery. Luxury vehicles idled at odd angles. Guests whispered openly, curiosity no longer pretending to be polite disinterest. Someone laughed nervously. Another shook their head, already framing the scene as gossip. Alara felt it slipping. She pivoted tactics. "Sir," she said, modulating her voice into something almost reasonable, "if you'll step aside, we can resolve this quietly." He looked at her then, really looked, and understood what she was offering. Not resolution, containment, a way to move the problem out of sight before it embarrassed her further. He shook his head once. "I'm already where I'm supposed to be." That answer landed poorly. Alara's lips thinned. You don't decide that. No, he said evenly. The system does. The maintenance worker, still hovering near the edge of the group, shifted his tablet again. He frowned, then frowned deeper. Lines of data scrolled past faster than he could easily parse. He'd seen faults before, glitches, hardware failures, bad updates, but this wasn't any of those. The logic tree was active, intentional. He glanced up at the man, then at the child beside him. Something clicked, though he couldn't yet name it. Ilara caught the look. "Focus," she snapped. "What's the delay?" The worker hesitated. "It's waiting." "For what?" she demanded. He swallowed. "For confirmation from an internal authority." "That's impossible," she said sharply. "Internal authority is me." The worker didn't respond right away. He stared at the screen again, then back at the gate. "Not exactly," he said, quieter now. That was enough. Ilara stepped forward, anger sharpening her movements. "I'm done indulging this," she said. "Remove them." The guards moved this time, though their steps were slower than before. The man felt his daughter's grip tighten again, felt her lean closer into his side. He shifted subtly, placing himself between her and the approaching uniforms without making it obvious. Protective. Instinctive. Before the guards could reach them, the panel emitted a sharper tone, 3 notes in quick succession. Not an alarm, but close enough that everyone flinched. The amber light turned steady blue, then pulsed once. Inside the estate, doors paused mid-cycle. A few lights flickered, and somewhere deeper in the property, a security checkpoint failed to update and defaulted to hold. None of it was dramatic enough to draw immediate attention from inside, but outside, the effect was undeniable. "What now?" Ilara demanded, irritation edging toward panic. The guard nearest the panel read the message aloud before thinking better of it. "System integrity check initiated." Ilara stared at him. "I didn't authorize that." The man finally spoke again, voice calm but carrying now. "You don't have to." A ripple of sound moved through the onlookers. Phones came up higher. A woman near the back whispered, "What does that mean?" No one answered. The maintenance worker took an unconscious step closer. "This level of integrity check only triggers if—" He stopped himself, eyes widening slightly as realization brushed past him. He looked at the man again. Really looked this time. The posture, the confidence, the way he hadn't once tried to bluff his way through. Ilara noticed the look and followed it, suspicion turning sharp. "Who are you?" she asked. The question wasn't accusatory anymore. It was unsettled. He didn't answer. Not yet. He glanced down at his daughter instead, meeting her eyes. She nodded once, as if they'd already agreed on something. The system hummed steadily now, no longer strained, balanced, waiting. Guests murmured openly. Someone laughed in disbelief. Another said, "Is this supposed to be happening?" The estate, meant to project seamless control, was quietly undermining the very person tasked with enforcing it. Ilara felt the ground shifting beneath her authority. She doubled down, raising her voice. "Everyone step back," she ordered. "This is a security matter." But no one was really listening anymore. The man remained where he was, unmoving, unflinching. He'd known this moment would come. Not exactly like this, but close enough. Systems didn't forget their makers. They just waited for the right conditions to remember. And those conditions were finally in place. The hum settled into a steady cadence, low and even, like a machine finally satisfied with its own logic. Ilara stood frozen for half a second too long, then snapped back into motion, barking orders meant to reclaim momentum. Guards repositioned, radios crackled, but nothing changed. The gate stayed closed. The blue pulse remained calm, almost patient. "This is a containment issue," she said loudly, for the benefit of everyone watching. "Step back while we stabilize the system." No one did. Yet the man felt the attention now, fully on him. Not hostile anymore. Curious. Measuring. He kept his eyes on the panel, listening not just with his ears but with memory. He'd built fail-safes like this to resist exactly what was happening now. Authority trying to muscle past logic. The integrity check wasn't a punishment, it was a question. Ilara marched toward the control housing, heels sharp against stone. "I want a manual bypass," she demanded. The guard shook his head. "It's locked out, ma'am." "Everything has a bypass," she snapped. "Yes," the man said quietly. "But not for this phase." Her head whipped toward him. "Stop pretending you understand how this works." He didn't flinch. "I understand why it's doing this." That earned a ripple through the crowd. A few guests exchanged looks. Phones rose higher, and the maintenance worker edged closer again, unable to stop himself. His tablet chirped, flashing a warning he'd never seen outside of training simulations. Ilara noticed. "What now?" The worker hesitated, then read. "The system's isolating segments, it's prioritizing." He stopped, frowning. "Child safety parameters." Silence fell, sharp and sudden. The man felt his daughter's hand slip into his pocket, fingers brushing the small, scuffed tag he carried there. She pulled it out slightly, peeking at the worn metal edge. He covered her hand with his own, gentle but firm. "Not yet." Ilara scoffed, though the sound rang hollow. "That's standard language," she said. "It doesn't mean anything." "It means everything," he replied. A distant alarm chirped once inside the estate, then cut off. Somewhere beyond the gate, a security door refused to open on command. Guests inside began to notice delays. Outside, the crowd leaned in. Ilara's voice sharpened. "You're causing a cascading failure." "No," he said. "You are." She stepped closer, invading his space, searching for intimidation to regain its bite. "Who do you think you are?" He met her gaze steadily. "Someone who doesn't rush a system when a kid's standing in front of it." That landed. Not loudly, deeply. A few murmurs turned into nods. The maintenance worker swallowed hard, eyes flicking between the man and the child. "If you're enjoying this and want to see where it goes," the man said calmly. Not to Ilara, but to the watchers beyond her. "Subscribe with the bell on, because the next part only happens if everyone's paying attention." Ilara stiffened, realizing the moment had slipped fully into public hands. She turned to her team. "I want diagnostics, full transparency, now." The panel chimed again, softer this time. A new prompt appeared, unreadable from a distance but clear enough to those closest. The worker's breath caught. "It's requesting a legacy confirmation," he said. "That shouldn't even be active." Ilara stared at the screen. "What does that mean?" The worker hesitated, then answered honestly. "It means whoever designed this anticipated someone like you." That was the first time her composure cracked. Just slightly. Enough. The man felt the system waiting, balanced on the edge between compliance and lockdown. He crouched beside his daughter, lowering his voice. "Do you remember what we talked about?" She nodded, serious now. No fear, just focus. He stood again, hands open. "The system's asking a question," he said. "It needs the right answer." Ilara shook her head. "You're not touching anything else." "I don't have to," he replied. The maintenance worker leaned in, eyes wide. "Ma'am, If this completes on its own, we won't be able to suppress the log. Ilara understood that word. Log meant record, meant proof, meant witnesses long after the crowd dispersed. Her jaw tightened. "Stop it." "I can't," the worker said, "and neither can you." The blue light pulsed again, brighter this time. The gate remained closed, but the system had moved past hesitation. Inside the estate, more checkpoints stalled, quietly refusing to play along. The illusion of total control was thinning. The man felt it in his chest, the familiar calm before resolution. He glanced down at his daughter. She looked up, eyes clear, ready. "Soon," he said softly. Ilara backed up a step, scanning faces, realizing too late that authority without understanding was just noise. The system hummed, patient and precise, waiting for the final input. And this time, it wasn't coming from her. The blue pulse steadied, no longer reacting to commands, only to conditions. Ilara stood rigid, eyes fixed on the panel as if staring could force obedience. Around her, the estate's rhythm faltered. Radios overlapped, guards repeated themselves, and no one quite knew who was in charge of what anymore. The maintenance worker swallowed and spoke again, a voice lower now. "Ma'am, the system's moved into autonomous validation." "That's not a thing," Ilara snapped, though doubt crept into the edges of her words. "It is when the architecture detects internal conflict," the man said calmly. "You're telling it one thing, its logic says another." She rounded on him. "You don't get to explain my systems to me." "They're not yours," he replied. The sentence landed like a dropped tool, sharp, final, impossible to ignore. A few guests gasped. Someone laughed in disbelief. Phones tilted, capturing everything. Ilara felt the heat of attention turn unbearable, the kind that stripped authority bare. Inside the estate, a second alarm chirped and died. A security door near the event hall refused to open, forcing staff to reroute guests. Irritation spread inward, mirroring the tension outside. The system wasn't failing. It was choosing. The man felt the shift like a familiar cadence. He'd built decision trees meant to protect people, not reputations, especially children. His gaze dropped to the girl beside him, then lifted again, a resolve settling in his shoulders. Ilara's voice sharpened. "This ends now. I'm authorizing a hard reset." The worker shook his head slowly. "You can't. That'll trigger a full lock." "Then do it," she said. "I won't be undermined by a glitch." The man inhaled. "It's not a glitch," he said quietly. "It's a safeguard." "For what?" she demanded. He answered without hesitation. "For moments like this." The panel chimed, louder now. Text scrolled rapidly, lines of verification running in parallel. The worker's eyes widened. "It's escalating to primary confirmation," he whispered. Ilara's confidence cracked. "Primary confirmation from where?" The worker didn't answer. He didn't have to. The implication hung heavy in the air, drawing every eye back to the man standing calmly at the center of the storm. The girl tugged his sleeve again. He crouched, meeting her eyes, speaking softly. She nodded once, clutching the small metal tag tighter. When he stood, something had changed, not urgency but readiness. Ilara followed the exchange, dread flickering across her face. "What are you planning?" she asked. "Nothing," he said. "The system is." The gate emitted a low tone that resonated through the ground. Inside, cameras adjusted angles, logs compiling in real time. Every command, every attempted override, every decision Ilara had made since the standoff began was being preserved. The worker's tablet buzzed again. "Ma'am, it's opening an audit channel." Her breath caught. Close it. I can't, he said. It's already live. Murmurs swelled. Someone said, "Is she losing control?" Another whispered, "Who is he?" The social balance tipped, curiosity transforming into judgment. Ilara stepped back, scanning faces, realizing the crowd no longer saw her as the authority figure. They saw a woman arguing with a system that refused to obey her. The man remained steady, hands relaxed at his sides. He wasn't enjoying this. He'd designed accountability to be uncomfortable on purpose. Truth rarely arrived gently. The panel displayed a final prompt, its blue glow brightening. The worker read it silently, then looked up, awe and disbelief mixing. "It's requesting verbal confirmation," he said, from an authorized legacy reference. Ilara's mouth opened, then closed. She had nothing to offer. No command, no badge, no title would satisfy that request. The man felt the moment settle. He glanced down at the girl. She met his eyes, calm and certain, as if this had always been her part. He nodded once. Around them, the estate held its breath. The system waited, patient and precise, ready to hear the truth it had been built to recognize. The silence stretched, taut as a wire pulled too far. Ilara stood motionless, the glow from the panel washing her face in cold blue light. For the first time since she'd arrived, she didn't speak. Authority, when it faltered, tended to do that, vanish all at once. The maintenance worker shifted his weight, eyes flicking between the prompt and the man. "It won't proceed without the confirmation," he said quietly, almost apologetic. "It's hard-coded." Ilara swallowed. "Then bypass it." "There is no bypass at this level," he replied. "It's foundational." That word hit harder than any technical explanation. Foundational meant intentional. Meant whoever built this system expected to be challenged and planned for it. Ilara's gaze snapped back to the man, sharp with a new kind of fear. "You did this," she said. Not an accusation anymore, a realization. He didn't confirm it. He didn't deny it either. He simply waited, the way he always had when pressure peaked and people revealed who they really were. Around them, guests leaned in openly now. Phones were no longer hidden. This wasn't an inconvenience anymore. It was a moment. Ilara straightened, gathering herself. "Even if you did," she said, voice tight, "you don't get to hijack a live security environment. There are people inside, high-profile people. And children," he replied evenly, "including mine." A ripple moved through the crowd at that. The framing shifted. This wasn't about a trespasser anymore. It was about a father standing his ground while power refused to listen. Inside the estate, staff radios crackled with overlapping reports. Doors holding. Access points delayed. Nothing catastrophic, just enough disruption to demand explanation later. Ilara knew audits were already writing themselves. She turned sharply to the worker. "Who else has access to that level of confirmation?" The worker hesitated, then answered. "No one currently on staff." Her jaw clenched. "Then why is it asking for it?" He glanced at the man again, then at the small metal tag visible in the child's hand. "Because it recognizes something," he said carefully, "or someone." The girl looked up at Ilara then, eyes wide but steady. Not defiant, just honest. That look unsettled her more than the system ever could. Ilara exhaled sharply and turned back to the man. "If you're trying to prove a point," she said, lowering her voice, "you've made it. And let us handle this before it spirals." He shook his head once. "It already spiraled the moment you decided who belonged here by how they looked." That landed harder than any accusation. A few guests nodded. Someone murmured agreement. Ilara felt the tide turning, social pressure pressing in from all sides. She made one last attempt at control. "Step away," she ordered, voice rising again. "If you don't, I'll have you removed by force." The guards didn't move. Not because they were defying her, but because the system wouldn't allow it. Their tablets displayed a quiet hold status, grayed out and unresponsive. One of them swallowed, eyes wide. "Ma'am, we can't." Ilara stared at him. "What do you mean, you can't?" "It's not accepting action commands," he said. "Everything's locked, pending confirmation." The crowd reacted audibly now. Gasps. Whispers. A low hum of disbelief. Phones captured every second. Ilara felt the full weight of public scrutiny settle on her shoulders. The man felt it too, but differently. He felt the responsibility of it. This wasn't about winning. It was about finishing what he'd started years ago, when he'd designed systems to outlast ego. He crouched beside his daughter again, speaking softly. She nodded, fingers tightening around the tag. When he stood, he took one small step forward, just enough to be unmistakably central. Ilara's voice dropped to a near whisper. "Who are you?" He met her gaze, someone who planned for this moment. The panel chimed again, louder than before, the prompt flashing insistently. The worker cleared his throat. "If the confirmation isn't given," he said, "the system will escalate to full disclosure mode." Ilara's breath hitched. "Disclosure?" "All logs," the worker said. "All decisions, broadcast to oversight." That was it. The trap closed, not by force, but by design. Ilara looked around, seeing not subordinates but witnesses, not control, but consequence. The man glanced down at his daughter one last time. She nodded, calm and certain, ready to speak when the system asked. The estate waited. So did everyone watching, because the truth was finally about to be said out loud. The prompt pulsed steadily, blue light washing over the gate and the people gathered before it. No alarms, no countdown, just expectation. Ilara stood rigid, hands clenched at her sides, as if sheer will might still bend the moment back in her favor. Inside the estate, the disruption was no longer subtle. Staff clustered near stalled checkpoints. Guests complained quietly, irritation mixing with unease. Every delay added another entry to the audit log now compiling itself, impartial and relentless. The maintenance worker shifted closer to the panel, voice low. "We don't have much time before it completes escalation," he said. "Once it does, everything goes public." Ilara's eyes snapped to him. "Define everything." "Override attempts, authorization conflicts, decision trails," he replied, "including yours." Her jaw tightened. She looked back at the man, fury and disbelief tangled together. "You engineered this," she said. "You built a system to ambush whoever stood here." He shook his head. "I built a system to protect whoever couldn't fight back." That answer didn't satisfy her. It wasn't supposed to. Around them, the crowd leaned in, sensing the shift from spectacle to reckoning. Phones were held openly now. No one pretended this wasn't worth recording. The girl stood quietly beside him, small hand gripping the metal tag. It looked insignificant. Scratched, dull, the kind of thing anyone else might have tossed away. He watched her for a moment, pride and weight settling together in his chest. She'd grown up inside blueprints and quiet promises, learned early that safety wasn't magic. It was built. Ilara took a step toward them, lowering her voice. "You don't understand the fallout of this," she said. "There are donors, board members, people who won't care why you did this." "I know," he replied calmly. "They'll care that it happened." That distinction landed with finality. A few guests exchanged looks. Someone whispered, "He's not backing down." Another murmured, "Good. If you want to see how this finishes, subscribe with the bell on, because this is where preparation turns into consequence." Ilara turned sharply to her team. "I want containment plans drafted," she ordered. "Now." One of the guards glanced at his tablet, then shook his head. "Ma'am, the system's restricting outbound commands." Her breath caught. "It's what?" "It's isolating you," the guard said quietly, "from issuing further directives." The words sucked the air from the space. Ilara stared at him, then back at the panel, realization dawning too late. This wasn't just exposure, it was inversion. The authority she'd relied on was now the very thing being limited. The maintenance worker cleared his throat. "The system's prioritizing original design intent," he said. "It's weighting inputs based on—" "On what?" Ilara snapped. "On authorship," he finished. The crowd reacted instantly. Gasps, laughter, disbelief. Phones tilted higher. Ilara felt the ground tilt beneath her, humiliation creeping in where arrogance had lived. She turned back to the man, voice tight. "You could stop this," she said, "right now." He nodded once. "I could." "Then do it." He looked at his daughter. She looked back, calm and steady. This was the moment they'd rehearsed quietly, not in words, but in trust. He'd told her once that systems listened better to truth than force. She'd believed him. He stepped aside, giving her space. The crowd murmured, confused. Ilara's eyes widened. "What are you doing?" "Letting it hear the answer it's asking for," he said. The panel chimed softly, prompting again. The maintenance worker swallowed hard. "It's ready for verbal confirmation." The girl took a breath. Small chest rising, falling. She lifted her chin, eyes moving from the glowing panel to the people watching, then back again, not afraid, certain. Ilara shook her head. "This is insane," she whispered. "She's just a child." "She's the reason," he replied. The system waited, patient as ever, blue light steady, logs open, witnesses gathered. Every preparation had led here, not to a dramatic override, not to a shouted command, but to something simple and unassailable. The girl's fingers tightened around the tag. She stepped forward half a pace, close enough for the panel to register her voice. Ilara felt it then, the full weight of what she'd dismissed. Not a trespasser, not a glitch. A lineage she hadn't recognized because she'd never bothered to look. The estate held its breath. And the system, built to listen for truth no matter who spoke it, waited for her words. The blue glow reflected in the girl's eyes as she drew in a careful breath. Around her, the driveway seemed to contract. Every sound muted except the low, steady hum of the system waiting to be answered. Phones were raised. No one spoke. Even Ilara seemed afraid that a single word might tip the balance too soon. The girl's voice came out clear, not loud, but perfectly placed. The panel responded instantly, not with a tone, but with movement. Lines of text scrolled faster, deeper layers unlocking one after another. The hum shifted, smoother now, almost relieved. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. "What did she just do?" someone whispered. The maintenance worker leaned closer, eyes wide. "She didn't trigger it," he said slowly. "How she authenticated it." Ilara staggered back half a step. "That's not possible," she said, though her voice lacked conviction. "She can't authorize anything." The worker shook his head, awe creeping in despite himself. "She didn't authorize access. She confirmed intent." The gate's lights changed, blue giving way to a calm white. The integrity check completed, a soft chime signaling resolution. Inside the estate, stalled doors resumed movement. Checkpoints unlocked. The system wasn't collapsing. It was settling. The man felt a long-held tension ease in his chest. He didn't smile. He watched his daughter instead, pride and gravity mixing as she stepped back to his side. He placed a hand on her shoulder, grounding her, grounding himself. Alara stared at the panel as if it had betrayed her personally. "What did it just confirm?" she demanded. The worker swallowed, reading the final status line. "It confirmed original design parameters," he said, "including primary stakeholder identity." Silence fell again, heavier than before. Guests turned their attention from the gate to the man standing quietly beside the child. The posture that had seemed unremarkable minutes ago now read differently, assured, deliberate, belonging. Someone in the crowd murmured, "That's him, isn't it?" Alara heard it. Her jaw clenched. "Explain," she said, not to the worker, but to the man. "Explain right now." He met her gaze evenly. "You assumed authority meant ownership," he said. "The system doesn't." The panel emitted one final tone, then displayed a summary screen visible to anyone close enough to look. The worker read it aloud before Alara could stop him. "Primary architect verified," he said. "Legacy protocols acknowledged. Oversight log finalized. Phones captured everything." Alara's face drained of color. "Architect?" she repeated. "You're saying he designed it," the worker said. "All of it, the perimeter logic, the child safety prioritization, the integrity checks." Murmurs surged, disbelief giving way to understanding. The narrative inverted itself in real time. The man who'd been blocked at the gate wasn't a threat to the system, he was its origin. Ilara's voice shook. "That's not in any of our records." "Because you never looked past the surface," he replied. "You enforced without understanding." She turned, scanning the crowd, realizing too late how this would play outside the estate. Witnesses, recordings, logs already flagged for oversight. There was no quiet fix for this. Inside the property, event staff hurried to smooth delays, unaware that the real disruption had already occurred. Out here, the driveway had become a courtroom without walls. The man glanced down at his daughter. She looked up at him, searching his face for reassurance. He nodded once. This part was over. Alara squared her shoulders, trying to reclaim something, anything. "Even if this is true," she said, voice brittle, "you had no right to—" "I had every right," he interrupted gently. "As a father, as the person responsible for keeping children safe when power fails." That landed harder than any accusation. A few guests nodded openly now. Someone muttered, "She judged him." Another said, "She never asked." Alara felt the judgment settle, heavier than protocol ever had. "This isn't finished," she said weakly. "No," he agreed. "It's documented." The worker's tablet chimed again. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "oversight has been notified automatically." Her eyes closed for a brief moment. When she opened them, something had shifted. Less arrogance, more fear. "Open the gate," she said. The command was unnecessary. The gate was already unlocking, metal sliding back with a smoothness that felt ceremonial. The path into the estate lay open, unobstructed. The man didn't move right away. He looked at the open space, then back at Alara. "This was never about entry," he said. "It was about being heard." She had no answer. He took his daughter's hand and stepped forward, crossing the threshold at last. The crowd parted instinctively, watching as the system recognized its maker without fanfare. Behind them, the gate remained open, white light steady. And everyone who had watched it happen knew the balance of power had shifted, quietly, permanently, and in full view of the truth. The gate finished its smooth arc and settled into place behind them, not closing, just resting, open by choice rather than command. The shift was subtle but unmistakable. The estate no longer felt like a fortress resisting intrusion. It felt like a space correcting itself. He paused just beyond the threshold, hand still wrapped around his daughter's. The gravel underfoot gave way to clean stone, and with it came the weight of every eye following them. Inside, staff slowed, conversation stalling as word rippled ahead of them faster than footsteps ever could. Alara remained where she was, rooted on the wrong side of the gate, watching authority slip through her fingers. Her voice found him again, thinner now. You can't just walk in like nothing happened. He turned, calm as ever. I didn't, he said. Everything happened. The maintenance worker hovered nearby, unsure whether to follow protocol or instinct. His tablet buzzed again, this time with a priority marker. He glanced at it, then at Ilara. Oversight's requesting a live briefing, he said. They want to know why the system flagged executive interference. The word interference stung. Ilara straightened reflexively. I was enforcing policy. The worker hesitated. The logs don't read it that way. A murmur moved through the onlookers who'd edged closer to the open gate. Some stepped inside now, drawn by curiosity and the undeniable pull of resolution. No one stopped them. No one could. He felt the estate responding as he walked. Lighting subtly adjusting, pathways clearing, on-access points opening without resistance. It wasn't obedience, it was recognition. He'd designed it to feel seamless for those it trusted, invisible even. Seeing it work now stirred something bittersweet in his chest. His daughter looked around, eyes wide, taking it all in. So, we can go home? She asked quietly. He nodded. Yeah, he said, we can. Ilara heard the word home and flinched. She stepped forward, crossing the gate line at last, her heels striking the stone with less confidence than before. This isn't over, she said. There will be reviews, consequences. For you, he replied gently. Yes. That gentleness hurt more than anger would have. She opened her mouth to respond, then closed it. For the first time, she seemed unsure which version of herself to present, the enforcer or the professional who'd just been exposed, and the maintenance worker cleared his throat. Sir, he said, addressing the man with newfound respect. Oversight's also requesting your statement as primary architect. A few nearby staff stiffened at the title. Someone whispered it under their breath, testing how it sounded. Primary architect. The phrase settled, reshaping perceptions in real time. He nodded once. I'll give it, he said, after my daughter's settled. That priority landed clearly. A couple of staff members exchanged looks, reassessing everything they'd assumed earlier. Ilara noticed and felt the sting of it, how easily respect shifted once context arrived. They moved deeper into the estate, not hurried, not hesitant. The path felt different now, less like borrowed space and more like something reclaimed. Guests stepped aside instinctively, offering smiles that were part apology, part admiration. Behind them, Ilara remained near the gate, fielding overlapping calls. Her voice was clipped, controlled, but the damage was already done. Every explanation sounded defensive now, every justification thin against recorded fact. The man paused near a low wall overlooking the drive, giving his daughter a moment to sit. He crouched, checking her face. You okay? He asked. She nodded. They were loud, she said. But you weren't scared. He smiled faintly. I was, he admitted, just not of them. That honesty grounded them both. A staff member approached cautiously, posture respectful. "Sir, welcome home," they said. The words carried weight. He accepted them with a nod, nothing more. Vindication didn't need applause, it needed acknowledgement. Farther back, Ilara watched the interaction unfold, feeling the full reversal settle in. The crowd that had once reinforced her authority now validated his. Witnesses mattered. She'd underestimated that. Her calm crackled again. "Ilara," a voice said, tight with concern. "We're seeing everything. We'll need a full report." She closed her eyes briefly. "Understood," she replied. The system hummed softly in the background, logs complete, priorities restored. It had done what it was built to do: protect truth from force, children from ego, design from misuse. He stood again, taking his daughter's hand. Together, they moved toward the heart of the estate, not to claim it, but to live in it, as intended. Behind them, the open gate remained a quiet symbol, not of failure but of correction. And everyone who'd witnessed the moment understood something fundamental had shifted. Not just for one man and his child, but for the way power would be questioned here from now on. The estate settled into a strange calm, the kind that followed disruption once the noise faded and only consequences remained. Conversations resumed in cautious tones. Staff moved with purpose again, but their glances lingered, tracking the man and his daughter as they disappeared deeper inside. Nothing felt quite the same, and everyone knew it. Ilara stood near the gate, posture rigid, phone pressed to her ear as oversight voices filtered in, measured, relentless, uninterested in excuses. She answered when required, clipped and precise, but each response stripped another layer from the authority she'd worn so easily earlier. Every log was time-stamped, every command preserved. There was no rewriting this story. She lowered the phone and looked out across the drive. Guests had begun to disperse, already replaying what they'd witnessed, shaping it into something that would travel far beyond the estate walls. She knew how narratives worked. This one wouldn't be kind to her. Inside, the man guided his daughter through familiar corridors that still smelled faintly of fresh polish and stone. The house felt quieter than he remembered, not empty, just respectful, as if it understood it had been observed and found wanting. He felt the weight of it in his chest, not triumph, but completion. They reached the sitting area overlooking the gardens. He helped her onto a low bench and knelt in front of her, checking her shoes, her hands, grounding himself in small, ordinary motions. "You did great," he said softly. She shrugged, then smiled. "I just said what you told me." "That's usually the hardest part," he replied. She looked at him for a moment, then asked, "Why didn't they believe you?" The question landed heavier than any accusation Ilara had thrown. He took a breath. "Because some people trust uniforms more than people," he said, "and systems more than understanding." "But the system listened," she said. He nodded. "Because it was built to." A staff member approached carefully, stopping a respectful distance away. "Sir," they said, "Oversight will be arriving shortly. They've requested to speak with you in person." He straightened. "I'll be ready." The staff member hesitated, "And they've asked that Ms. Ketterly remain available." He nodded again. No satisfaction, no revenge. Accountability didn't need either. Outside, Ilara watched a vehicle bearing oversight credentials roll through the open gate. She felt the eyes of her team on her, no longer deferential, just observant. This was the cost of public certainty turning public doubt. She squared her shoulders and stepped forward to meet them. The oversight representatives moved efficiently, asking questions that cut straight through justification and landed on intent. Why did you block access? Why did you override warnings? Why did you ignore escalation cues? Each answer sounded thinner than the last when weighed against the logs. When they entered the estate proper, the man was already waiting, daughter seated nearby with a glass of water. He rose calmly, greeting them without ceremony. They addressed him by title now, carefully, aware of the optics. Ilara stood across from him, suddenly conscious of every assumption she'd made. The boots, the jacket, the way she'd decided who he was before asking. She saw it clearly now, and the clarity burned. Oversight turned to her. "Miss Ketterly," one of them said, "you'll be placed on temporary administrative leave pending review." The words were measured, professional, devastating. She nodded stiffly. Understood. No argument, no protest, just the weight of consequence settling where arrogance had lived. The man said nothing. He didn't need to. Justice didn't require commentary. Later, as the oversight team departed to continue their review, the estate felt lighter, as if a tension it hadn't known it carried had been released. Staff moved differently now, less rigid, more thoughtful. He walked his daughter toward the living quarters, hand warm in hers. "Are we in trouble?" she asked quietly. He smiled. "No," he said. "We're just done explaining ourselves." She nodded, satisfied. Behind them, Ilara lingered near the garden edge, watching father and child disappear down the hall. For the first time, she allowed herself to sit with the truth, not the one enforced by protocol, but the one exposed by it. Power, she realized too late, wasn't about control. It was about responsibility, and she'd failed at that in front of everyone. The system hummed softly in the background, indifferent now, its work complete. It had listened, it had recorded, it had revealed, and in doing so, it had restored something more valuable than access. Dignity. The house settled into evening the way it was meant to, quietly, without tension riding the walls. Lights warmed as the sun dipped, shadows stretching across corridors that no longer felt watchful. For the first time since arriving, the estate felt like a home instead of a test. He sat on the edge of the bed while his daughter changed into clothes she'd picked herself, soft and familiar. The noise of the day felt far away now, muted by routine. She climbed beside him and leaned against his arm, the simple weight of her there grounding everything. "Are they still mad?" she asked. "Some of them," he said honestly, "but that's okay." She thought about that, then nodded. They were wrong. "Yes," he said, "they were." Outside the room, the estate moved differently. Staff spoke with quieter respect. Not because they were told to, but because they'd seen what happened when assumptions collided with truth. The ripple hadn't stopped at the gate. It traveled, reshaping how people looked at one another, how they paused before judging. Downstairs, oversight teams continued their work, cataloging processes, flagging failures, rewriting sections of authority that had gone unquestioned for years. Names would be changed, titles reassigned, procedures corrected, none of it loud, all of it permanent. He tucked his daughter in, smoothing the blanket, brushing hair from her forehead. She caught his wrist before he stood. "You promised," she said softly. "I know." "You kept it," he smiled. "I always will." When he stepped into the hall, the quiet greeted him like recognition. This place hadn't needed him to prove anything. It had needed him to finish something. The system had done the rest. Outside, the gate remained open, not wide, not dramatic, just enough. A symbol, if someone chose to see it that way. Correction instead of conquest. Balance instead of dominance. Ilara stood alone near the drive, coat folded over her arm, waiting for transport that would take her somewhere less certain. She watched the house, no longer with ownership or command, but with reflection. She'd replay that first moment again and again, the boots, the jacket, the child. How quickly she'd decided. No one came to speak to her. No one needed to. The truth had already done its work. As her car arrived, she took one last look at the open gate. It didn't feel like an insult anymore. It felt like instruction. Inside, he poured a glass of water and stood by the window, watching dusk settle over the property. There was no victory in his chest, just relief. Dignity restored didn't need celebration. It needed space to breathe. He thought about how easily this could have gone differently if he'd raised his voice, demanded respect, tried to overpower the moment. The system would have resisted. People would have doubled down. Nothing would have changed. Instead, he'd let truth do what force never could. Later, as the estate quieted fully, messages began to arrive. Careful, respectful, some apologetic. He didn't rush to answer them. Tonight belonged to something simpler. He returned to his daughter's room once more, checking on her. She slept peacefully, unaware that a story had already begun spreading beyond these walls, one she'd be part of, whether she realized it or not. He closed the door gently. This wasn't a story about a gate or a mansion or a security system that refused to listen to the wrong person. It was about what happens when power forgets to look down, and how quietly it can be corrected when truth is allowed to speak. If you want the next story where injustice meets its reckoning, ask me for the next title. Subscribe and don't miss our next story. Security fired the wrong man, then the power went out. Trust me, you'll feel it. And tell me in the comments, what injustice should we tackle next?
Refused a tip from a billionaire?
Ronan Price's voice rang off glass. You think that's noble, mechanic? A few executives snickered. The woman at the head of the steel table didn't smile. Vivian Kessler watched as the maintenance man slid her thick envelope back toward her hand. By the way, where are you watching from? Tell me in the comments below. The lounge sat above the factory like a balcony above a storm. Quiet up here, roaring down there. The envelope lay between polished nails and oil-stained fingers, money pretending to be respect. He didn't argue. He didn't bow. I fixed your line, he said, steady. Keep your tip. Ronan leaned forward as if tasting blood. Pride won't keep your kid breathing. Someone murmured agreement. Vivian's eyes flicked once to the battered toolbox by his boot, then returned to his face. Cool, measuring. He was Elias Ward, but in this building he was mostly a badge and a uniform. Calm, unshakable, he stood where power never looked, in a room designed to make men like him swallow their own worth. He nudged the envelope another inch away, refusing to let money speak for him. In his jacket pocket, an inhaler pressed against his ribs. In his wallet, a clinic receipt folded until the paper went soft. At home, his 9-year-old son fought asthma that didn't care who owned the building. Every shift mattered, and still he wouldn't let dignity be something rented by the hour. Ronan snapped his fingers toward the door. Back to your tunnels, then. Vivian finally spoke, smooth as sealed glass. Leave him. Lessons stick better when they hurt. Elias turned without a word. His boots made one blunt sound on polished flooring before the elevator swallowed him. As he descended, the air warmed, the hum deepened, and the world became real again. The service corridor greeted him with buzzing fluorescents and sweating pipes. Heat rolled off metal. Somewhere a compressor coughed. Somewhere else, a conveyor clattered like teeth. Down here, nobody wore perfume. They wore work. A young tech, Jessamora, matched his stride. You really said no? It wasn't a tip, he said. It was a leash. Jessa's eyes darted toward the elevator doors. They don't like being told no. They'll live, he said, though he wasn't sure he would. Line 7 waited behind a safety fence. The morning's VIP tour had nearly collapsed when the stabilizer valves stuttered. One ugly shiver that makes investors nervous. He'd felt it through the floor before the alarms even chirped. Palm on a vibrating panel, ear catching the faint rasp of a bearing starving for oil. He'd fixed it fast. Not for applause. For the people working beside it. Now the line ran smooth. Lights steady. He checked the gauge, felt the controlled heat, and his mind flashed, unwanted, to a different kind of heat. Sun on steel, field generators whining, the math of load and failure where a bad call meant bodies. He shoved the memory down. That life was buried. His phone buzzed once. A text from the clinic, Milo wheezing again. His throat tightened. He stepped into an alcove where the wall dulled the noise and called back. The nurse's voice softened, practiced kindness. He's stable, but his refill didn't clear. There's still a balance. I paid, he said, too quickly. I know, she replied. The system says otherwise. I'm sorry. He stared at the concrete until the gray seemed to tilt. A balance, like breathing could be paused for billing. He forced his voice level. Keep him calm. I'll come after shift. He keeps asking when you're home, she said. I'm trying, he whispered and ended the call. When he stepped back out, a supervisor approached, tablet tucked to his chest, hands too clean for this corridor. Ward, your schedule is changing. Effective immediately. Elias didn't blink. Changing how? Cutting hours, the man said, eyes fixed on the screen. Budget realignment. Also, you're removed from VIP response. That roster is why the line didn't fail today. The supervisor's mouth twitched. Orders from upstairs. The punishment landed quietly, more vicious than laughter. Elias nodded once, because rage cost energy he needed for his son. Send it to me. It's already in the system, the supervisor said, and walked away. Jessa hovered, fists curled. They're doing this because of the tip. Elias didn't answer. He opened his toolbox on a nearby cart and began reordering his tools with deliberate care. Wrench aligned, screwdriver nested, meter wrapped, rag folded. His hands didn't shake, but his chest did, tight with anger and fear. He imagined Milo's small wheeze, and kept ordering steel like prayer against the day ahead. Above them, behind glass, money decided who mattered. He shut the toolbox with a soft click, and the sound felt like a lock turning. He shut the toolbox with a soft click, and the sound felt like a lock turning. Jessa watched him like he'd just done something reckless. They cut your hours, didn't they? He slid the cart toward the next inspection point. Looks that way. That's not realignment, she muttered. That's retaliation. He didn't deny it. The corridor vibrated beneath their boots as Line 7 powered up for the afternoon cycle. Heat shimmered above the ducts. Somewhere deeper in the plant, turbines spun with a steady, predatory whine. Work didn't care about pride. Work only cared about whether the system held. A shadow stretched across the grated floor. Ronan Price stepped through the security gate, suit crisp against the grease-streaked backdrop. He didn't belong in the labor zone, and he wore that fact like armor. Ward, he called, voice carrying over machinery. You've made an impression upstairs. Elias kept tightening a bolt. Wasn't trying to. Ronan clasped his hands behind his back. You embarrassed the CEO. I returned her envelope. You refused generosity, Ronan corrected. Investors noticed. They're asking questions about morale. Elias straightened slowly. Morale's fine down here. Ronan's smile thinned. Not for you. Effective tomorrow, you're reassigned to auxiliary maintenance. Night shifts. Lower visibility. The word settled like dust after a collapse. Night shifts meant fewer hours with Milo. Fewer clinic calls answered in real time. More distance between father and son. Jessa stepped forward before she could stop herself. He's the only one who caught the valve stutter this morning. You know that. Ronan's gaze flicked to her badge. And you are? Jessa Mora. Systems tech. Careful, Miss Mora, he said softly. Loyalty is admirable. Misplaced loyalty is expensive. He turned back to Elias. You could have taken the money. Nobody would have blamed you. A man in your position should know when to nod and smile. A muscle jumped in Elias's jaw. My position? Maintenance, Ronan replied, gesturing around them. Replaceable. The word echoed longer than the machinery. Ronan leaned closer. You've got a kid, right? Medical issues? His voice dropped. You can't afford theatrics. For a second, Elias's vision narrowed to a tunnel of sound, the churn of belts, the metallic tang in the air, the pulse in his ears. He forced himself to breathe evenly. My son isn't a bargaining chip. No, Ronan said. He's leverage. Silence stretched. Even the machines seemed to hesitate. Ronan adjusted his cufflinks. Take the reassignment. Keep your head down. And next time someone offers you $5,000 for a simple fix, take it. He walked away without waiting for an answer. Jessa exhaled shakily. He had no right bringing up your kid. Elias wiped his hands on a rag. Upstairs always thinks they have rights. You're not replaceable, she said quietly. Not after what I've seen. He glanced at her. What have you seen? You read systems like they're alive, she said. That's not maintenance. That's something else. He didn't respond. Years ago, in another uniform, he'd been trained to hear instability before it screamed, to feel failure before it snapped. That training had saved lives. It had also taken pieces of him he never got back. A warning light blinked amber on a distant panel. Minor fluctuation. Most wouldn't notice. He did. He moved toward it, checking readings. The numbers steadied under his touch, but something felt off, like a rhythm slightly out of sync. He filed it away in his mind. Jessa leaned against the rail. You know, people watching this story unfold should probably stick around, she said with a faint, ironic smile. Moments like this don't stay buried. He gave her a sideways look. She shrugged. If anyone's listening out there, subscribe and keep watching. Something tells me this isn't ending the way they expect. He almost laughed, despite himself. You always narrate your own life? Only when it feels historic. Historic? He doubted that. To him, it felt like survival. His phone buzzed again. A photo this time, Milo in a hospital chair, giving a thumbs up, oxygen tube looped around small ears. The caption read, breathing better. Don't worry, Dad. Elias stared at the image until the corridor blurred. The boy's smile was crooked, stubborn. Just like his. I can't lose this job, he murmured. You won't, Jessa said. He wasn't so sure. Power upstairs had long memories and fragile egos. He'd challenged both. Overhead, a faint vibration rippled through the catwalk, stronger than before. He looked up instinctively. Did you feel that? He asked. Jessa frowned. Probably load balancing. Probably, he echoed, though his instincts disagreed. Across the factory floor, behind reinforced glass, he could see the executive observation deck suspended like a throne. Figures moved behind it, silhouettes in tailored suits. One of them paused. Even from this distance, he could feel Vivian Kessler watching. Not with anger. with curiosity, and that unsettled him more than any punishment. Behind the glass, Vivian didn't move for several seconds. The factory lights reflected off the observation deck, turning her into a silhouette cut from shadow and silver. Then she turned away, disappearing into the executive corridor. The vibration under Elias's boots returned, faint, irregular, not enough to trip a system alert, not enough for anyone upstairs to care, but enough. He crouched beside the panel Jessa had recalibrated earlier and pressed his palm against the casing. Warm, stable. Yet the hum inside carried a tremor, like a held breath. "You're hearing something again," she said quietly. "Yeah. Software says it's within tolerance. Software doesn't feel metal stretch." She studied him a moment. "You ever think about going back?" "Back where?" "To whatever you were before this." He tightened the last bolt and stood.